Ibn Khaldun, the Muslim historian, sociologist, he tells us every empire has three phases. The first phase, there is a small, tight-knit group of fierce warriors, al-asaba. And because they have physical strength from years of, if somebody's always fighting, they're going to have biceps. If somebody's always carrying things, they're going to have good shoulder muscles. By nature of constantly being on the go, being in fight mode and flight mode, you start to become a good fighter. So you have a group of people, they're tight-knit, they have a clear mission, they're good fighters, they know how to fight, and they take over the empire. This is phase one, the seizing of power. He calls this the isaba, the small tight-knit group. What happens in phase two? Ibn Khaldun says, no empire lasts more than 3 centuries, except rare exceptions. 3 centuries, or 3 generations. What happens in the second generation? The first generation was born in the desert, in the mountains, in the middle of nowhere. They learned with difficulty, with hardness, with hardship. They didn't have food, didn't have water, no materials. Somehow they made it. Second generation, where were they born? They're born in the palace with a golden spoon in their mouth. Their nappies were made of silk. They had special buffets every day because they're now growing up in the palace as the emperors of the empire. They grow up in luxury. Ibn Khaldun says, what kills Muslim civilization is this L word, not Louis Vuitton, luxury. Luxury is the killer. Luxury is the silent killer. He said, you'll have the greatest Muslim empire of all time, but what happens in generation 2? The kids that grow up in luxury, with everything at beck and call, they become the most lazy, incompetent, useless, and egoistic people. And then what's phase 3? They start to fight with each other. One brother slaughters the other brother. Then a cousin comes and he tries to take the empire and he kills his brother. The ego, the fighting, the hunger for power. In between them, they're fighting each other. What's happening? The enemies are like, great. They're distracted by fighting with each other. This is our chance. This is our chance. Let's go. And then the third phase, the third generation, he calls it the phase of decline and destruction. This analysis of Ibn Khaldun is so ahead of his time. It not only applies to empires, it even applies to drug lords, it even applies to social movements. When Napoleon Bonaparte arrives in Egypt, and then later the British colonize Egypt, when the Italians colonize Libya, when the Italians arrive in Somalia, when the British arrive on the shores of India with the East India Company, when this happens, and the power is seized, and the people are suppressed, the first 50 years, if you assess and you carefully read the history of colonized people, from the Horn of Africa all the way to the coast of Yemen, Malaysia, Indonesia, if you look at the history of colonized people, the first 50 years when they are oppressed and they are taken over by another power, they are asking themselves the question, how did this happen? What did we do wrong? Somebody's come, he's taken over my house, I'm cooking in the kitchen, I'm paying the bills, and he sat here taking all my food and exporting it. What did I do to deserve this? Those who lived and those whose parents, maybe some of the people whose parents or grandparents here lived through those years of oppression and colonialism, they will remember that a whole generation of people were asking themselves this question. How did this happen to us? What did we do wrong? This is the most important question. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to wake up the believers, sometimes He throws upon them a bucket of cold water. And the bucket of cold water is the boots of a colonial power coming and stamping all over your house. And you wake up and you think, hold on a second, I have a problem. It's an external problem, but it forces you to start looking internally. What did I do wrong? How did I get here? One of the best things that ever happened to the Muslims was receiving oppression, so that they could start thinking, hold on a second, why are we messed up? How did we get here? One of the best things that happened to the believers was losing at the Battle of Uhud, because when they lost and when they went home with their heads hung, 70 Sahaba died. 73 of the Prophet's companions, or 71, according to the various narrations. They start reassessing, what did we do wrong? Sometimes failure is the greatest lesson, the greatest push for reform, for internal reform. The Muslims start to reform themselves. They start to come together because now they have a common enemy. They have a common enemy that's coming and pressurizing them. So between themselves, they say, guys, look, I know before we were fighting about where to place our hands in salah. And we were fighting before about where our toes should go in the musalla. But now our kids are being brainwashed. Their language, the Arabic language, has been removed and is being replaced by a foreign language. The curriculums in school have been changed. We can't get any jobs. We have been enslaved. Let's put aside the placement of hands for a second and let's figure out how to solve this problem. Sometimes only a foreign enemy, a common enemy, can force a group of Muslims to sit and think, guys, we need to come together and unite on this one. Without a common enemy, unfortunately, the vast majority of Muslims remain in disunity and division. I still remember the first time there was changes to curriculum in primary school in the UK. And we saw protests break across the country. Muslims of different denominations, different groups, different ideologies, different madhahib, different masalik, all standing outside the same school. Why? They have a common problem that unites them. And then I see Catholics, Orthodox Jews joining this coalition because they have a common problem that unites them. When there is a common problem, it forces the Muslims to unite. If we go back, for example, we take one example. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not give support to the Muslim. This is the principle. He will not give us support until we find unity between each other. If you go back into history, go back to the history of Algeria, the land which was occupied for 156 years by the French. One of the most important steps towards the retreating of the French was the forming of an alliance between Muslim scholars in Algeria. Al-Bashir al-Ibrahimi and Abdul Hamid ibn Badis. These two men, uncle is nodding because he knows this, he knows these names. If you go to Algeria, half of the people you meet, their names are Abdul Qadir or Abdul Hamid or Al-Bashir al-Ibrahimi because they named their children after those that resisted this occupation. These two men, what did they do? They created an educational revival in Algeria and a unity of all the scholars from all parts of Algeria. They went to every part of this country, in every corner, to every imam, every scholar they could find, and they said, listen, brother, right now, we can't fight about those things we used to fight about. We have a bigger priority and a bigger enemy and a bigger issue at hand. What's that issue? Our kids, the curriculum that they're learning in school, our Arabic language has been removed. Islamic studies has been removed. If we don't act now, they will lose their Iman, they will lose their language, they will lose their identity. Are you with me? I'm with you. One by one they went and they created a coalition, Jam'iyyat Ulama al-Muslimin fil Jazair, the coalition of Algerian Muslim scholars. Once they were able to unite the scholars and unite the leadership, they said, guys, we have one mission, we move as one, we have one idea, one goal, one agenda. We have to first reform the education of our next generation. If we don't fix their education, if they don't learn Arabic and the Quran and their fundamentals and their beliefs and their worldview, they will lose their identity. We need to fix this, guys. And one by one, small, secret madrasas started popping up around Algeria. Underground madrasas, secret schools. Why? To preserve the identity of the following generation. Unity, tarbiyah, the development of the oppressed. Allah will not give victory to the Muslims until a generation arises amongst them where their Iman is as firmly rooted as the mountains and their identity is clear to them. Until then, we'll keep dilly-dallying the way we are. The unity and the reform of the education system and the planting the seeds for a generation to rise who know who they are, who know their heritage, who know their deen, who are ready to stand up to the occupying powers. If not, they would have gotten a generation who said, well, let's assimilate. It's great we learn French and not Arabic. It's great we learn philosophy and not Islam. Down with the old and in with the new. That younger generation, that same theme is very common in the story of Musa alayhi salam, the story of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. For 13 years in Mecca, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam has a secret school. Who knows the name of the secret school? Darul Arqam. What's he doing in the secret school? He's teaching the believers the basics, the core beliefs of Islam, the core reason they exist, the whole idea of Allah, why we know Allah, why we believe in Him, why we worship Him, what are we doing on this earth. For 13 years, he just spends time with them, let them digest all of this. Because once they've digested all of this, they will become invincible. Part of the reason that 300 of those Muslims were able to win the Battle of Badr was because these beliefs were so deeply rooted in them, nobody could shake them. Not money, not people, not threats, nothing could shake them. Allah will not give us victory until we have Iman and Amal Salih actions. Allah did not say memorization of the Quran is a condition for victory, for His help, for His support. We have to prioritize the Iman first, the big questions, and follow that up with the understanding of the Quran. Because we are facing a generation They're not like generations before. They're not rote memorizers. They are a literate generation. They learn at school geography, history, philosophy, literature. But when they come to the madrasa, that's all we have for them. That's all we have for them? No, our deen has so much more for them. We have to start with Iman. This was the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and then we follow it up with the Quran.